It's time to enjoy the last of the autumn colour, but it's also time to think about preparing the garden for that cold, wet and windy weather ahead in winter. So here are some simple, sustainable tips to make sure that your garden is weatherproofed and sails through unscathed. Tender plants are the ones that can't survive frost outdoors. They're often exotic or subtropical, and think of things like dahlias, but also cannas, bananas, houseplants that are summered outdoors, including succulents. If you're not sure, look at the label. You'll often see they say half hardy or tender. So as well as the ones I've mentioned, also remember salvias and geraniums, or sometimes we call them pelargoniums. Now, if you're not sure whether a plant is tender, check the RHS website, particularly the RHS Hardiness ratings. That's a scale. All the H1s need to come indoors into your house. H2s, they're the ones for the greenhouse, need a minimum of 5 degrees C and frost-free conditions. And then we've got the H3s, that's your borderline hardy stuff. So if you live in a mild city location or around the coast, you'll probably get away if you've got a good little microclimate in your garden with them being outside all winter. If you can, move tender plants inside before the temperature drops. This is somewhere like a frost-free greenhouse, conservatory, or even a bright porch. There they'll be protected from the cold and the wind and will be fine until the spring. For the more borderline hardy plants, think about grouping those together. Get them near the house wall because it'll be more sheltered and that'll create a little microclimate. When we get really cold weather, they still might need some extra protection. So this is when we might wrap the pot, and sometimes we'll use things like repurposed bubble wrap. Of course, we're looking for plastic-free alternatives, so you might have an old woolly jumper, some hessian, and then that's great, but it does get wet, and the wet means that it's less effective. So you still might need to wrap that in an old compost bag as well. The best insulating materials are dry materials. This is because we need a layer of air, and that's what holds the insulation value. When it gets wet, that's lost. So this is why we're looking to things like reused plastic to keep it dry. With borderline evergreens like this, so the H3s, you have to remember over winter they are prone to desiccating because the leaves keep losing the moisture all through the winter, and yet the ground might be frozen. So this is why a little bit of extra care, moving them into a shelter position, or if you haven't got this, trying to get them in somewhere like a greenhouse is a great option. Even if they do get a little bit browned over winter here, they'll grow new leaves and be quite happy by the spring. Some borderline hardy plants like this Fatsia, they're going to be fine in the coming years, but when they're young, they can be more frost sensitive. So during cold spells, or if you live in a really cold area, some wrapping might be really useful. I've kept it quite simple, so there's a ring of chicken wire going right around the plant. That then contains this layer of bracken, a good 3-4 inches, and to keep the wet out, just putting some recycled plastic on the top for some packaging, and that can stay on either until the cold spell is gone, or if you're in a really cold area for much of the winter. The chicken wire method can work really well with big plants like these bananas. It's too large to get in the greenhouse and really heavy, so difficult to move. But if we cut them off just below the leaves, so we've still got a stalk, then put the chicken wire around, stuff it full of bracken, or we could use straw because bracken's not always available. Put the plastic on the top to keep the moisture out. That will work fine. Equally for something like tree ferns, if we fold up the fronds, in that base we can put something like hessian to provide the insulation, and a little bit of plastic again to keep the water off just in the crown area. That will mean that those plants will survive quite happily outside. Sometimes things like dahlias and cannas just get really big in the ground and large clumps are difficult to lift. So in that situation, cut them back at the end of autumn and then put a good 8 minimum centimetres of mulch on the top. Garden compost is ideal for that. That'll keep the frost from going into the ground and getting to those tubers and rhizomes. However, if your soil is still very wet in winter, they are best lifted and taken into a frost-free place because they will rot in the ground otherwise. Finally, check your garden structures. Things like greenhouses, make sure all the panes are okay, non-broken, and get that fixed. Also have a look at your fence panels and trellis. If you can fix those before the wind blows them down, you'll have a repair rather than a replacement. So with these few things, your garden will be ready and protected for the winter ahead. And that means you'll get a head start into next year, making your garden look good. For more tips, don't forget to subscribe to our latest videos. And of course, there's plenty more information on the RHS website.